Warning disclaimer. This story is a fictional narrative created for the purpose of emotional entertainment. It explores sensitive topics such as love, temptation, and betrayal, and aims to reflect the complexity of human emotions and relationships. It does not glorify infidelity or immoral behavior. Instead, it portrays the emotional consequences of crossing boundaries in committed relationships. Viewer discretion is advised, especially for those who may be triggered by stories involving emotional trauma, regret, or broken trust. The purpose of this story is to spark reflection, not judgment. It was a chilly Friday evening when my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect. My husband's best friend, Daniel, was stuck in the city due to a canceled flight. He had a layover for the night and needed a place to stay. My husband, Mark, was away on a business trip in Chicago, and I was alone in our cozy two-bedroom house in the suburbs. When Daniel asked if he could crash at our place, I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. Daniel had been part of our lives for years. In fact, he introduced me to Mark. But there was always something about him, an unspoken energy, a quiet closeness we had once shared. Still, I told myself, it's just one night. What's the harm? He arrived around 9 p.m., a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and that familiar smirk on his face. He looked tired, yet there was a spark in his eyes, one I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thanks for this," he said as I let him in. "Last-minute plans aren't my style." I smiled politely, feeling the air shift just slightly. We made small talk as I reheated some leftover pasta and poured 2 glasses of red wine. The awkwardness wore off quickly. Sitting across the table from him felt natural, a little too natural. I caught myself smiling at his jokes more than I should have. His laugh was contagious, and I found myself forgetting that my husband wasn't the one I was entertaining tonight. Later, I showed him the guest room, laid out fresh towels, and wished him a good night. But as I turned to leave, he said quietly, "You've always been kind. Not just tonight." His voice lingered in the air, and for a second, I froze, unsure of what he meant, unsure of how I should respond. I went to bed telling myself it was nothing, just words, just a long day. But deep down, something felt different. Something inside me had stirred, something I thought I had buried a long time ago. And as I stared at the ceiling in the dark, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this wasn't just going to be an ordinary night. The next morning brought a kind of stillness I couldn't quite explain. The air felt thick with something unspoken, yet neither of us addressed it. I made coffee and found Daniel already awake, sitting quietly on the porch swing, staring at nothing in particular. He smiled when I joined him. It was casual, warm, even, but there was a certain intensity behind his eyes that made my pulse quicken. We talked like old friends. About work, travel, how Mark had always been the organized one between them. We laughed about silly college stories they had shared, ones I'd heard a dozen times before, but this time, Daniel told them differently. There was a softness in his voice, a nostalgia that felt heavier than simple memory. Then the conversation shifted. "You know, before Mark, I used to think maybe you and I—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. My heart skipped a beat. The silence between us was loud, screaming. Even, I looked down at my mug, pretending I hadn't heard what I clearly did. But that moment cracked something open. Truth be told, Daniel and I always had an energy between us. Even before Mark and I became serious, I remember fleeting glances, laughter that lingered too long, and conversations that went just a little too deep for comfort. But when Mark pursued me, Daniel backed away without explanation, without a fight. He disappeared for a while, and when he returned, I was already wearing a ring. Now, sitting beside him years later, with no witnesses, no expectations, and no wedding band currently in his pocket, it all came flooding back. Not just the memories, but the what-ifs we had both buried. He wasn't the same Daniel anymore. There was maturity in his gaze now. Less playful, more reflective. A man who had lived and lost, who carried his own regrets. And in contrast, I realized how lonely I'd been lately. Not unhappy in my marriage, just invisible. Like I had become more of a role than a person. the wife, the caretaker, the scheduler. Daniel, in that brief morning light, saw me. And that's what made it dangerous. The rest of the day moved slowly. Every brush of his shoulder, every accidental laugh, every shared glance felt like it was building toward something I couldn't yet name. He wasn't just my husband's best friend anymore. He was a familiar stranger, someone I once might have loved, had life played out differently. And now, for the first time in years, I found myself wondering if it was too late to rewrite the ending, or if I was about to start something I couldn't undo. As evening approached, I found myself preparing dinner more carefully than usual. I arranged the plates neatly, lit a candle without even thinking, and chose a bottle of wine that we usually saved for special occasions. I told myself it was just hospitality, he was a guest after all, but deep down I already knew it was more than that. Daniel joined me in the kitchen, offering to help. Our hands brushed as we reached for the same spoon. We both laughed, but we didn't pull away as quickly as we should have. That single moment, that second of skin on skin, lingered between us like a silent confession. We sat down to eat, and what started as casual conversation quickly turned into something deeper. He asked about my art, something my own husband hadn't asked me about in years. He remembered little things. The shade of blue I loved to paint with, how I always used to hum when I worked on a canvas. And just like that, I felt seen. Not as someone's wife, not as part of a routine, but as me. The wine flowed slowly, like the words between us. Our voices grew softer, closer. We shared stories we'd never told anyone. Fears, regrets, half-lived dreams. The mood had shifted completely. The laughter was gone, replaced by long silences, soulful eye contact, and a subtle, painful truth neither of us dared say out loud. At one point, the power flickered. The lights dimmed for a second, just enough for him to look at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Longing. Not lust, not fantasy. Longing. Like he wished time had chosen differently. Like he wished he had stayed when he first walked away. I felt my body responding to that look. Not just physically, but emotionally. The walls I had built for years, carefully constructed around my marriage, had suddenly begun to shake. There was no arguing with the feeling anymore. The intimacy we were sharing wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, mutual, and dangerous. I stood to clear the dishes, hoping the moment would pass, but he followed me. "You're not the same person you used to be," he said softly, standing close behind me. "But you're still the most real person I know." I didn't answer, couldn't. My throat tightened. My hands trembled. The air between us was thick with tension, 1,000 unsaid things hanging in it like smoke. We were towing the edge of a cliff, and we both knew it. One word, one move, and we'd fall. I turned around to face him, and for the briefest second, we were nose to nose. His breath was warm. His eyes searched mine for permission, and I saw it the moment he almost kissed me. But he didn't. He stepped back, clenching his jaw, trying to stop whatever it was that was building. And I turned away, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. The night wasn't over, but it had already gone too far. The house had fallen silent. The dishes were clean, the wine glasses rinsed, but the tension still clung to the air like humidity after a storm. Daniel had gone to the guest room, and I retreated to my own, but sleep was nowhere to be found. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, trying to make sense of the swirling emotions inside me. Guilt, confusion, attraction, loneliness. Every feeling overlapped with the next, and none of them made it easier to breathe. I closed my eyes and tried to push it all away. He's your husband's best friend. He's off limits. It was just wine. It was just memories. It didn't mean anything. I repeated those thoughts like a prayer. But prayers don't always drown desire. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful. I held my breath. Then a gentle knock. "Are you awake?" Daniel's voice was quiet, uncertain. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Yes. The door creaked open, and he stood there. Not coming in, not backing away. Just standing. "I just wanted to say good night," he said, almost like an excuse. But the way he looked at me betrayed his words. There was longing in his eyes, regret, everything I had tried so hard not to feel. "You already said it earlier," I replied, forcing a small smile. He nodded but didn't move. And neither did I. There was a pause. One of those long, pregnant silences that doesn't break. It shatters. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here." Something about the way he said it broke me. I stood up, crossed the few feet between us, and looked him in the eye. "It's not your fault," I said. "We're both to blame. This shouldn't be happening." "But it is," he whispered. Then it happened. A kiss. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't violent. It was slow, full of years of things unsaid. His hand touched my cheek gently, like I was something fragile. My hands reached for his shoulders as if I'd been waiting to fall into them for years. And for a moment, everything around us disappeared. The marriage, the guilt, the consequences. There was only warmth and skin and breath. But then reality crashed down like a wave. I pulled away first, heart racing, shame exploding inside me like fire. "We can't," I gasped, my voice shaking. "This isn't who I am." He stepped back immediately, eyes filled with remorse. "I'm sorry," he said again. "That was wrong." Neither of us said anything else. He walked out of the room, and I shut the door behind him, locking it like I could somehow lock away what just happened. But I couldn't. That moment, a single kiss, had changed everything. Shouldn't have happened. But it did. And nothing would ever be the same again. The sunlight streamed through the blinds far too brightly for the way I was feeling. My head wasn't aching from the wine. It was aching from regret. The weight of what had happened the night before sat heavy on my chest like an anchor. It was just a kiss. Just a moment. But even in its smallness, it had ruptured something sacred. Something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I rolled out of bed slowly, every movement deliberate, like my body was mourning something. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping, foolishly, that Daniel had already left. But as I turned the corner, there he was, fully dressed, duffel bag at his feet, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He didn't look up right away. When he did, the silence between us said everything. "Morning," he said, voice low and neutral. "Morning," I replied, avoiding eye contact as I reached for a mug. Neither of us brought it up. Not the kiss. Not the emotions. Not the fact that the air between us was now thick with guilt. We danced around it like it hadn't happened, both of us pretending that silence could somehow erase it. He took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down. "I called a rideshare. Should be here in 10. He glanced at his phone, then back at me. "Thanks again for letting me stay." It was such a simple sentence, so painfully normal, but it stung not because of what he said, but because of everything he didn't. No apology, no explanation, just a goodbye wrapped in awkward politeness. I wanted to scream, or cry, or ask him what that kiss meant to him, but I couldn't, because I already knew the answer. It meant something we both wished it hadn't. "I hope your flight's smooth," I muttered, trying to sound composed. He gave a small nod. The car pulled up in the driveway minutes later. Daniel grabbed his bag, paused at the door, and turned to me one last time. "Take care of yourself," he said quietly. "You too," I replied. And just like that, he was gone. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed felt deafening. I stood there for a long time, mug in hand, replaying every second of the night before. The wine, the closeness, the kiss. And then the terrible truth. I had betrayed my husband's trust. When Mark returned later that day, everything felt different. I smiled, cooked dinner, asked about his trip. But inside, I was unraveling. Every word I spoke felt fake. Every glance he gave me felt like a knife. He noticed my quietness, but didn't press. He hugged me and kissed my forehead, completely unaware of the storm inside me. And that hurt the most, because I wasn't just keeping a secret from my husband. I was keeping a secret from myself. The days that followed were an emotional blur. I went through the motions of being a wife, cooking dinner, folding laundry, smiling when I needed to, but nothing felt real anymore. Something had cracked inside me, and no amount of pretending could cover it up. I was carrying a secret like a splinter in my soul, and every moment with Mark made it burrow deeper. He noticed, of course. Mark had always been perceptive. At first, he asked if I was feeling okay. I blamed it on stress. He believed me. Then he asked again, a few days later, this time with a more serious tone. Is there something you're not telling me? I shook my head, forced a smile, kissed him on the cheek. But guilt doesn't stay buried for long. It finds ways to leak out, in sudden tears during quiet moments, in distant glances at the dinner table, in the way my hands trembled when he touched me. One evening, a week after Daniel had stayed over, Mark came home from work and asked if I had talked to Daniel recently. My stomach dropped. No, I lied too quickly. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at me, puzzled. It's weird, he said. He's not replying to my messages. I tried to act surprised. Maybe he's busy? But I saw the suspicion flicker in Mark's eyes, just for a second. And from that moment on, the tension began to grow between us like a crack in a frozen lake, widening slowly, silently. Then came the moment I feared most. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, Mark walked into the room holding my phone. My stomach twisted instantly. Why is there a deleted thread with Daniel? He asked, his voice calm but icy. I froze. I didn't delete anything, I whispered. Another lie. Don't lie to me, he said quietly. What happened when he stayed here? I wanted to say it was nothing. I wanted to lie my way out, to say he slept in the guest room and nothing ever crossed a line. But I couldn't. My eyes welled up. My mouth opened, but no words came. And Mark saw everything he needed to see in my face. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just stared at me like I was a stranger. You kissed him? He asked. His voice cracked. Not from rage, but from heartbreak. I nodded, tears running down my cheeks now. It was one moment. I didn't plan it. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did, he said. And you let it. That night he slept in the guest room. And for the first time since we got married, our home didn't feel like ours. It felt like a place divided by walls, by pain, and by a truth that could no longer be denied. The silence between us had become unbearable. Mark no longer asked how my day was, no longer kissed me goodbye in the mornings, no longer looked at me the way he used to. He had every right. I had broken something that didn't have a clear path to repair. Days turned into weeks, and though we still shared the same house, we lived in different emotional worlds. I kept trying to find the right words, an apology that would sound like more than just guilt, a confession that would prove I understood what I had done. But nothing I thought of felt worthy of forgiveness. One evening, I walked into the guest room where he now slept. He was reading, but he didn't look up. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds before speaking. I need to tell you everything. He closed the book, leaned back, and finally looked at me. His face was tired. Not angry, just exhausted, like a man who had been carrying a weight too long. I told him everything, from the moment Daniel arrived to the hours we spent talking. The way the tension built, the kiss, the guilt, the regret. I told him how I had buried pieces of myself over the years, the woman I used to be before the routine, before the predictability of marriage, and how, in Daniel's presence, that old version of me had resurfaced for a fleeting, destructive moment. Mark didn't interrupt. He didn't cry. He just sat there, taking it all in. When I was done, there was silence, the kind that only exists between two people who know something is ending, even if neither of them says it out loud. I wish you had come to me, he finally said, his voice low. I wish you had told me how lonely you felt. I would have listened. I would have changed. I nodded, tears falling again. I know, and that's what hurts the most. You didn't deserve this. None of it. He exhaled deeply and looked away. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while, he said. I need time. I felt like my heart had been split in two. Does that mean we're over? I asked. I don't know, he said, almost whispering. I just know I can't look at you right now without seeing that moment in my head. When he packed his things the next morning, he didn't slam the door. He didn't make a scene. He just kissed me on the forehead, the way he used to when everything was okay. Only this time it felt like a goodbye. And when he walked out, the weight of what I had done crashed down on me fully. I hadn't just broken his heart. I had broken mine, too. Weeks passed. The walls of our home echoed with silence, memories, and questions I kept asking myself but couldn't answer. Was one night worth the life we had built together? Was I simply broken? Or had I allowed something inside me to break the moment I stopped fighting for our love? In Mark's absence, I tried to piece myself back together. I kept the house clean. I still made coffee for 2 out of habit. But the other mug remained untouched, just like the side of the bed where he used to sleep. I went through our photos one night, scrolling through years of love, vacations, laughter, and the life we shared. It hit me all over again. I had not just made a mistake. I had rewritten our entire story in one moment of weakness. Daniel never reached out. He disappeared as quickly as he had arrived. Part of me wondered if he regretted what happened. But I didn't contact him. Whatever we had shared was born out of loneliness, not love. And it wasn't something I wanted to hold on to. It was something I needed to let go of. Then one day Mark called. I left a few things there. Mind if I stop by? I said yes, unsure of how I would feel seeing him again. When he walked through the door, my heart felt the same ache as when he left. Only now, layered with hope and fear. He looked different. Not colder, but calmer, like someone who had thought things through. He collected his things quietly, and just before walking out, he paused. Do you still love me? He asked. I didn't hesitate. I never stopped. He nodded, looking down at the floor. I've been talking to someone, a counselor. I needed to understand how we got here. And I realized I stopped showing up too. Not the same way you did, but enough that you felt invisible. His honesty stunned me. I didn't know what to say. I'm not saying I forgive you, he added. But I'm not ready to throw everything away either. Tears welled in my eyes. What do? We start over slowly, he said. Together or not at all. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. One that came with scars, but also with a sliver of hope. I had done something unthinkable, but I wasn't beyond redemption. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something more powerful than guilt. I felt ready to rebuild. 28.